very much, Toby. I prefer young to old. The last time I was in Berlin was actually working on the third time launch of the Beetle. So I like to think that I can speak from a perspective of being connected to the past as well as to the future. What I want to talk to you today about is a thought which is what I call inspiration is for amateurs. I want to talk in detail about the creative process and why it's important for the future of agencies. People often say that Bill Bernbach raised advertising to an art form. And I think he would be the first person to point out that he disagreed. However, he was an artist. And for that reason, the connection between art and advertising are interesting and are worth exploring. The most important of these connections is the emphasis that artists place on the process and practice of creativity. To illustrate this point, there's one artist that I think exemplifies this sense of process. Chuck Close is a hugely influential American artist, prolific in the 60s and 70s, and featured in many of the world's leading contemporary collections of art. His work is famous, as you can see here, for very large-scale, hyper-real portraiture. He was obsessed with the idea of pure communication. He wanted nothing to stand between the portrait and the viewer of the portrait. And what's remarkable about his work, and you can see it in this detail, is that even when you put your nose on the canvas, you can't see any brush strokes. And this was at the heart of his technique. And it's as if the artist has disappeared. And for me, it's as if that's also what happens with really good advertising. The person making the advertising disappears. And this is exactly why art and advertising aren't the same thing. Chuck had some very interesting perspectives on how he did his work. And this is the important one. This was his advice, as he said, for anyone who would listen to me. And he said this: inspiration is for amateurs. If you wait for a bolt of lightning, you're not going to make anything. All the best ideas come out of the process. They come from doing the work. Now, Chuck's point was that creativity is actually a process of systematically challenging conventional wisdom and questioning techniques in search of perfect communication. He was also a contrarian who believed that making problems is more fun than solving them. Now, does this contrarian in search of perfect communication sound like anyone we know? Does it sound like anyone? He says things like this: I fear the sins we may commit in the name of creativity. I fear that we may be entering an age of phonies. So here is the great champion of creativity, able to look it in the eye and fear how it can unleash phonyism in his industry. It's a fantastically penetrating thought. And the point is that Bill Bernbach also thought very deeply about the workings of the creative process. And these thoughts are the foundations of our agency, and they're regarded by many as the cornerstones of the creative revolution. But these aren't just principles of the past, and they will serve us well in the future too. You know, the point is this: the world changes pretty fast, but underneath it all, people don't really change. And so you have this idea, which Keith had already, but it's fashionable to talk about changing man, but a communicator must be concerned with unchanging man. And the point is this: despite their recent advertisement, which I'm sure you've seen, Facebook isn't really like chairs. Facebook is just the digital answer to an age-old craving to belong to a community and express yourself. So right now, we're living in a world where there's an explosion of techniques, fashions, style, different media choice. But the primacy of an idea that relates to a person, and that being the heart and soul of all communication, will always endure. Now, as the guy who sold a funny little German car in post-war America, Bill was a natural supporter of the underdog. He suspected that creativity could be seen as the smaller, weaker, and poorer relation to science, logic, and knowledge. And then, as now, creativity was mistrusted and misunderstood by business. And like Avis, it needed to try harder. And that is where this thought is born from, which is our theme for this section, that creativity is the most powerful force in business. As far as Bill Bernbach was concerned, and it's the thought which I wrestle with every day, creativity has an image problem. The tortured genius, the unpredictable outburst, the eureka moment, the lightning strike, the bolt from the blue, and not to mention the 3-martini lunch. It all sounds very non-linear and not something you can depend on to build your business. Bill simply rejected the notion that creativity is obscure, esoteric, or unmanageable. And his practice was governed by this thought: merely to let your imagination run riot, to dream unrelated dreams, to indulge in graphic acrobatics and verbal gymnastics is not being creative. And I emphasize the word indulgence. The thing is that Bill Bernbach emphasized creative effectiveness right from the very get-go. He even went so far as to define creativity only in terms of, as he said, greater sales more economically achieved. Now, here's the rub. When something is measurable, predictive models are never far behind. And predictive models lead to formulas, and formulas lead to rules, and rules are the enemy of true creativity. And that's why he was cautious not to let the pendulum swing too far the other way. He didn't want theory to ever get in the way of a good idea. And he specifically warned against the dangers of trying to make a science of art. Logic and overanalysis can immobilize and sterilize an idea. It's like love. The more you analyze it, the faster it disappears. And this, I think, is a message that we need to be listening to again. We're actually facing an interesting situation at the moment where the rise of pre-testing, data mining, neuromarketing, sentiment tracking, and, forgive me, crowdsourcing, to name but a few innovations, they're often seen as replacements for talent, experience, and intuition. And they should be fuel for talent and experience and intuition, not replacements. Over-reliance on data results in generic knowledge that is easily available to your competitors and easily available to other agencies. The thing is that knowledge must be digested and emerge in the form of fresh, new combinations and relationships. And that is creativity. The point is this: rules are what the artist breaks, because the memorable never emerged from a formula. So we've reached an odd point here. According to Bill, you must reject wild creativity. It isn't effective. But equally, you must reject the rules that harness that creativity. It's kind of paradoxical. So what's left? Well, what's left is something that artists instinctively understand. Creativity is a deeply human process. It is neither a moment of inspiration or an exercise in ticking boxes. And when we think of it like this, we have to remind ourselves that creativity cannot be only defined by the role of a few specialists. It defines the whole enterprise. And the point is this: creativity is far too important to be left to the creatives. It must be practiced by all of us. Clients and their agencies must encourage it throughout their organizations. It must be a light that shines everywhere. And the point is this: In an age of great transition, we must be creative about the creative process. And the point of this, every generation thinks that their moment in history is unique. Sure, TV was new once upon a time, and social media is kind of just getting started. But that said, I think the digital revolution we've seen over the last 15, 20 years is pretty profound. It's disrupted and remade the relationships between brands and consumers. It's disrupted and remade the relationships between clients and their agencies. But this disruption is liberating. Smart agencies are relying less on individual genius and are building alternative teams and approaches. At DDB, we are guided by the principles of social creativity, which, to paraphrase, is ideas designed to be shared. And we're building around that a more open and collaborative process that involves a much wider range of skills than ever before. We're building new combinations of strategists, creatives, technologists, analysts, user experience people, and these new creative teams are every bit as revolutionary as Bill Bernbach was in putting art and copy together all those years ago. The challenge today for businesses and their agencies is to think hard and make changes to the process of briefing, creative development, research, and the deployment of ideas. We cannot allow ourselves to become imprisoned by history, forever repeating ourselves. The world demands change. And the point is this: it takes courage to reach for the unfamiliar, to not rely on what we're good at, and to not follow the safe routines that have worked before. But if you want breakthroughs, you have to be prepared for the unknown. And that is the price of staying ahead of the game. The process that we share as clients and agency should continuously inspire us. And creativity, at the end of the day, is no mere embellishment. It is at the very heart of every modern enterprise.